Picture a time when martial arts was still finding its footing. A rough, unpolished sport, cast out from the spotlight and forced into the shadows. It was the late 90s, a period when the UFC had been banned from television and fighters were battling in front of small crowds in very small, forgotten venues. In this murky world, where records were scarce and legends were often born from whispers, one man carved out a name for himself. He began life as Ralph Bartel, but called himself Rafael Torre. He was everything wrong with the early world of martial arts. Everything began rather simply, raised by his white parents in an unassuming home. We don't know much about those early years. No dramatic tales of hardship or triumph emerged from the records. But what we do know is that somewhere along the line, Ralph discovered he had a gift. No, not for fighting or anything like that, but for making up stories. As he grew, so did his willingness to stretch the truth into something much more grand than his reality could even fathom. By the late 90s, mixed martial arts was in something that we call, the Dark Age. The sport had been shoveled underground by legislation, banned from pay-per-view after political pressure deemed it just too brutal. Events sprang up in unlikely places. Indian reservations, school gyms, really anywhere that could host a fight. There was no ESPN coverage, no glossy magazines tracking every move. It was a vacuum of information, and into that vacuum stepped Ralph Bartel. Now calling himself Rafael Torre, he was no longer the white kid from California, but now a Brazilian with fighting credentials. He arrived on the scene with a bold claim, an undefeated 14-0 record in underground fights. Battles, he said, took place in shadows too deep for anyone to verify.
I was 14-0 before I retired.
Why doubt him? In the sport Star for Heroes, his story fit the mold. But Torre wasn't content to just play the fighter. He picked up a pen and started writing. He covered small shows across the West Coast, King of the Cage, Tachi Palace fights, places where the sport really just clung to life. His blogs and interviews filled a void, and soon he wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was able to position himself as a voice people trusted, a truly invaluable position for someone like Bartel.
He was one of those guys that snuck through my crazy radar. Because he's a friend of a friend, so I assumed.
He was probably one of the most popular journalists back then on the underground. I mean, Rafael Torre was all over the underground. It was 2000. It was still in the dark ages. So It was easy for a guy to bust up. Oh, dude, he was probably one of the top 3 writers in all of MMA.
Well, I remember he was very productive, and he would do, he was doing his version of gonzo journalism.
For somebody like Rafael Torre to write a story about you, and you see yourself on the internet, you're like, wow, that's like a badge of honor.
Everybody was cool with me, but some people really, really were much nicer. And one of those guys was Rafael Torre.
Romy, what's the alley? Jiu-jitsu.
When I think about Rafael as a reporter, I thought he did a good job.
You reveal so much of who you are. With these people, they become your community. They become your family, and you're at peace.
And Rafael was one of us.
Not satisfied with simply being himself or moderately successful journalist, he would decide to become someone with a super soldier resume that was enough to make even Mirko Krokop raise an eyebrow. As Rafael, he claimed to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and half Brazilian warrior with a lineage tied to the Gracie family.
He told people he was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
But this guy, Eddie, was hanging around with this guy. He was doing.
He said he was half
website.
Brazilian.
He was from Brazil. His father specifically was from Brazil.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school started springing up. Brazilians came up here, started opening them up left and right.
He said he'd been a Navy SEAL, a hardened soldier turned cage fighter. It was a persona that captivated people, including figures like Eddie Bravo, who'd later question what he saw.
My friend Eddie Bravo called him out, and Eddie rolled with him. And I remember him coming back to me, and he's like, "That guy's not a black belt." And I go, "What, you sure?" And he goes, "Dude, he don't know anything." It turned out that this dude wasn't really a black belt at all. Yeah. And
and he wasn't half Brazilian.
Yeah, it was all crazy. We were driving, and Eddie had this conversation with him on the phone. So then he calls him up, and he was like, "Hey, are you a fucking black belt? Like, tell me your." The guy's like, "Well, I'm a black belt in Japanese jiu-jitsu." He goes, "Stop. Are you a fucking black belt?" And there's like this big pause. It was a fake Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt.
What do you mean fake?
Fake. He wasn't really a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Told everybody he was. And this is the early days of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts where there weren't a lot of them. So you could almost kind of get away with it. Like, people didn't know. And then he said, like, "Oh, it was like a Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. It wasn't Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm not really like a black belt,
Yeah.
He's like, "Bro, you're a fucking liar. You're a liar." So Eddie separated himself from the guy. Yeah. This is how full of shit this guy was. This guy had a friend drop him off in the woods because he said he was going to a kumite karate contest, like a big karate competition, but it was no rules and it was secretive. So he dropped him off in the woods. Like he had a duffel bag with him, rather, and it's like a duffel bag that's just big enough to fit a trophy in it.
Yeah,
right, like about this big. So he leaves, goes out into the woods. The guy comes back the next day. He's got a trophy, no duffel bag. So he brought a fucking trophy with him, and then he came out of the woods like, yeah, I won. I fucked everybody up, and like so he thought this guy would tell everybody, that he beat everybody in this karate tournament.
Now, if you have everyone buying into all this, what is the one thing you probably shouldn't do? If you guess putting it to the test against real fighters, that's correct. So guess what he did? Yep, in 2001, Torres Tell took a turning point. He was invited to compete in the Abu Dhabi Combat Club Submission Wrestling World Championship. That would be the event that became modern grappling's resurgence. ADCC is what we all know it as now. A tournament that drew the best grapplers on the planet. It was a chance to prove his black belt wasn't just a story. But when he stepped onto the mat against Bo Hirschberger, the truth fell out of the pockets like spaghetti. Hirschberger tapped him out in under a minute. A blink and you miss it. And that was it. For anyone looking in hindsight, it was a glaring sign. A black belt, a supposed master, probably shouldn't fall off that fast. Yet somehow at the time, Torre brushed it off and was able to continue unchecked. But back then in those early years, Torre's dedication to the sport lent him an air of authenticity. He was everywhere, writing, talking, building a reputation and a network. To his credit, for a while, his stories worked. Not long after, for some unknown reason, but probably really stupid one, Torre doubled down. He announced he was coming out of retirement for a grudge match against Loka Tinau, a former student at King of the Cage 7 in February of 2001. The event unfolded outdoors, rain pouring down, turning the cage into a slippery stage. What happened next would become one of the most notorious moments in early MMA history. The two men gave promos, building the fight as if they had to settle this right now. Tinau was a heavyweight and not really the most experienced or skilled opponent, so many expected something of an odd fight, but still a fight.
Around December, I heard Rafael was coming out of retirement.
He was fighting one of his old students. It was a vendetta.
And I went out there to film him, and I saw all the techniques he was doing, and I couldn't help but notice as he was doing them that they were sloppy. That's a generous way of saying it.
I want to strike a lot, but I would like to submit him. I would definitely like to submit him, but I'd like to hurt him first.
You're seeing him come out of retirement with a record of 14-0 in no-holds-barred fighting.
So then I'm like, oh man, for this fight I want to be right up cage side. And I go up there and I look at it.
Here we go, round one. Rafael Torre on the ground.
When the time came for the two men to lock up, the fight was a total sham. Even to those who had minimal understanding of MMA, this was just not it. Torre and Tinau danced around throwing punches that barely landed. Then Torre dropped to his back, almost theatrically, and Tinau followed, barely resisting. In a move that looked rehearsed, Tinau offered up his leg, and Torre locked in a knee bar. The moment he put the knee bar on, his credibility was pulverized into fine powder and washed away by the rain in the cage.
Rafael Torre, another big knee, Rafael Torre. Knee bar. Rafael Torre has got him in a knee bar. He's tapping. It's over.
The leg isn't even fully extended, and Big Joe starts to tap.
Call it rapid cognition, right? When you know right away.
We're here with Rafael Torre. Rafael, now is the grudge put to rest?
Yes, it's totally done. He hit me hard, and I got him back a little bit too, so I think we're even.
Okay, so now, are you going to continue in mixed martial arts, or will you now retire again?
Hell no, these young guys coming up hit too damn hard, they're too fast, they train too much, I'm too old.
The crowd watched, confused, as Torre was declared the winner. It was so blatant, so poorly staged, that whispers started immediately.
This is what I shot for King of the Cage right before Rafael's fight. This is him hitting the pads.
Oh, wow.
Look at this footage.
Oh, snap. You didn't tell me that. Look at that jump kick. Look, see how the knee's bent when he goes to armbar, not straightens out his leg?
Yeah, there's his knee bar set up.
That is the worst thing I've ever seen. He left his leg on the inside of the knee bar. That's terrible. Yeah. So we know right there.
Pretty much everyone who mattered at this point had a feeling that Rafael Torre wasn't who he said he was. That fixed fight was the thread that unraveled everything. People started digging. Fighters, fans, anyone who had bought into the legend. They found no Navy records, no Brazilian roots, no black belt lineage.
He lied about everything. He wasn't from Brazil. He wasn't a black belt. He didn't know jiu-jitsu. He wasn't a Navy SEAL. Even his name.
Rafael Torre was a ghost, and behind the mask was Ralph Bartel, a man from California with no fighting pedigree. The MMA community of the early 2000s, very small but fiercely rabid, turned on him. They essentially formed an internet posse and ran him out of the forums and the MMA world, sending him off to never be seen or heard from again as just another guy claiming to be a Navy SEAL super soldier and a fighter. Except, you see, that wasn't the end. Ralph was not the type to simply go quietly into the history books. Within the same year, while cruising in California's group activity scene, he would meet his newest reason to break the law. In late 2001, he crossed paths with Angelina Richards, a married woman with 2 kids. They struck up an affair after the group meeting, and before long, they decided that an affair just wasn't going to cut it. Together, they devised a plan to kill Angelina's husband, Brian Richards, and claim $1 million of his life insurance policy. The alleged Navy SEAL would quickly try to outsource the job, attempting to recruit UFC fighter, former Marine sniper, convicted murderer, and of course registered sex offender Gerald Strebent. He offered $10,000 to do the deed. Strebent would decline the offer and didn't bring it up again after that. So Bartel decided to handle it himself. On December 21st, 2001, closing out one of the most disastrous years anyone involved with the sport has ever had, he lured Brian to a gym in Rancho Cucamonga, California, with some vague promise or pretext. Inside that gym, Bartel attacked. Using a rear naked choke, a move he'd picked up somewhere along his fraudulent journey, he strangled Brian to death.
The other guy that we know that claimed to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt that really didn't know anything, that turned out to be a murderer.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a dude we knew, his fake name was Rafael Torre.
Yeah.
But his real name, what was his real name?
Damn, I don't remember.
I know a dude who killed a guy with a choke.
In the ring?
No, killed him in a gym. He was banging this guy's wife.
Oh, he really went for him.
Yeah, it was crazy. He was banging the guy's wife, and he invited the guy to his school, and then choked him to death and killed him, and then was driving the guy's car around town. Homeboy winds up killing some dude, strangling him to death, the husband of this chick that he's banging, and he winds up going to jail for it. I mean, he was a murderer. He got this guy
for insurance money, dude.
Yeah,
really?
The wife of this guy that he strangled. You know, so they decided to set this up, and he choked the guy to death.
Yeah,
killed the guy with a real naked choke. He was one of those guys that snuck through my crazy radar, like, because he's a friend of a friend. So I assumed, you know, I was fucking 30 years old. I didn't know any better. I was dumb, and I was like, I assumed 30. Yeah.
Aren't you fully cooked by then?
Nah, you think you are. You haven't met enough murderers yet.
How ironic is it that his black belt wasn't legit, but he killed someone with a rear naked choke?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So it was legit.
Like that, poor guy he
did
killed.
The job, you know what I'm saying?
Poor guy he killed didn't train at all and probably didn't even see it coming. He just jumped him and choked the shit out of him. Can you imagine that, man? Your fucking wife is banging some other dude, and that dude comes to your house and kills you.
He didn't go to his house. He lured him into
his gym.
Yep, to his gym.
Yeah. Fuck. And
I testified on that trial.
Did you really?
Yes.
You had to go to court?
I had to go to court.
Many have said that in order for Bartel to have done this with his very minimal skill, he would have likely lied to Brian in order to let him show him the hold, or, you know, something to that effect. Knowing Bartel and how he loves to cut corners and do things the most dishonorable way possible, this scenario wouldn't surprise anybody. In the final disrespect to cover his tracks, he loaded the body into Brian's pickup truck, drove to a supermarket parking lot, and dumped it there, hidden under the trash bags. The next day, Angelina played the worried wife, reporting Brian missing. His brothers searched and found the truck, and then found Brian's body. The police followed the trail all the way back to Bartel and Angelina due to an old loose end they forgot to tie up. Remember that UFC fighter that Bartel had tried to hire? Well, he began calling detectives and giving them the information.
Hi, Detective Tom. I'm calling in regards to a guy that was murdered up there. His name's Brian Richardson. And I'm trying to find out if there's any kind of information, like a flyer or a website or anything that tells the developments of the case and discusses, you know, like where to call for reward information and stuff like that.
I'm not sure if there's a flyer on the Sheriff's Department's website. There may be. You can always call 1-800-WE-TIP, or I think it's 1-800-78-CRIME, and provide any information that you may have. There may be a small reward available. I'm not exactly sure. I know that the family's working on some things, and I know that WE-TIP has things available too.
Okay, but so you basically would call these hotlines and give them any information you have, and then wait for them to contact you back if there's a reward?
Well, one of the things about that is most of it, like WE-TIP, you can remain anonymous. If you want to remain anonymous, but obviously when you remain anonymous, they don't know who you are.
For sure.
Or you could talk to us. We're the one of the investigators investigating the crime.
Yeah. Well, the problem is, you know how touchy all these things are. You know what I mean? You know how touchy it is. Like, let's say, if a suspect, finds out that someone is talking with the police, and if the guy's already, been accused of doing, a homicide, then that puts whoever, is calling or looking into, working with the police, that puts them at a huge risk. You know what I mean?
Well, I can tell you how we operate. We don't release any of that information to anyone. As a matter of fact, we can even keep it confidential until the very last absolute minute.
Yeah, but what if, for sure, if somebody was to have, important information, then that they would have to go to court and testify to that,
Well, that's true.
And then they would be standing in front of a person, that perhaps they've known for a long time, and perhaps, that person has a lot of influential friends, you know what I mean? So
right.
I just need to know more information so I can, pass it along to my friend. And the last thing, somebody wants to do is get themselves killed, you know what I mean?
Well, I can understand that. I can answer a lot of those questions for you, but I can tell you, like you said, bottom line is ultimately, even if there is a reward involved, in order to get that reward, it's upon successful conviction and prosecution.
Yeah.
Part of that requires testimony of a person if they have, in fact, got sufficient information.
Sure.
The other thing,
that testimony, requires more than like a $2,000 reward for someone to put their neck out,
Sure.
I mean, because for sure this is not like a stolen car issue, This
no, murder.
Exactly. So if somebody's to stand up in front of a jury, and have a defendant sitting there that, is accused of something like this is just not something they can, that's not even worth $2,000 to have a chance of ending up the same way.
Well, my understanding is the family's trying to come up with a significant amount of money, but I'm not sure how much.
Okay. What's your name, Mr. Tom?
Detective Toms, T-O-M-S.
T-O-M-S?
Yeah.
Well, I'm living out here in L.A. right now, and it would be great if you and I could get together,
okay.
And in like a non-official way, and talk about, the situation, talk about things.
Okay.
Because if the last thing I want is to feel like there's any pressure on me, like I'm gonna, like I'm gonna be on the receiving end of some, whatever happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
completely.
And I know that might sound cowardly, but I don't want to end up the same way.
I understand that.
Life ahead of me.
Right, I understand that.
And I do have a heavy conscience, so it's wrong what happened.
I agree completely.
So if you and I were to be able to sit down and talk in an unofficial way, without recorders, without anybody. Maybe, I don't know if you could, I don't have a car, I don't have anything. Maybe if you were able to drive down here to LA and we could meet somewhere in some park or something and just discuss the situation. And, I would really like to help you. I would really, really like to help you. And I'm not, I wouldn't call and waste your time with some bullshit stuff that I heard from a drunk dude at a party. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I have to drive all the way down here to LA, it's a pretty serious thing.
Well, let me tell you this. My partner and I work this. I don't know if there's another detective named Carl Espinoza. Would probably be both of us, because we don't do anything like that as one man. I can tell you we could definitely sit down without any recorders or anything like that, and I can explain everything to you in great detail, exactly how it would work. No hiding anything. I mean, like you said, there's a lot at stake here.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. And if for some reason somebody up in Rancho Cucamonga was to know you're coming down here to LA to talk to somebody, right away someone's going to know who you're talking to. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
So it's a slightest hint that
absolutely not.
Then I'm going to have to put my tail between my legs. It's the slightest hint that I'm going to be, exposed. I just absolutely can't risk that.
I understand. Well, let me tell you honestly, I got to ask you something. Would you be willing to give me your name right now so that I can do some checking up on you before I come out and talk to someone who I don't even know who the hell you are and I don't get ambushed?
Yeah, oh, no, I understand that. But let's say you put my name down, which I don't have a problem with, and for some reason someone tells your number one suspect, hey, we're going to be talking with this guy.
Would never happen.
I'm finished.
I guarantee it would never happen.
Okay.
I guarantee you.
I know, and you sound sincere, you really do. But, you know, I just...
Because it wouldn't even go in any type of report.
Okay, well, what kind of, I mean, you can do a background check on any, you know, federal, state, or anything. I'm a prior service military guy.
What am I going to do? I'm going to check your criminal history.
Okay, and then I don't want anybody besides you to know my name.
Absolutely not.
And I'm serious here. I really want to help you, and I really think that, you know, I know this case is kind of stalled up right now, and nobody has a lot of information that can help you. And I can really, you know, what if I could really help you and you blow it by my name getting out of the spot?
Won't happen.
Okay. You ready to write down my name?
Go ahead.
Okay, Gerald.
Gerald? Spell that.
Gerald.
Okay.
Roy is my middle name. R-O-Y. Strebent.
Spell it.
S-T-R-E-B-E-N-D-T.
I gotta go to court and just finger them.
The cops called me because I called Gerald once, and when I was talking to Gerald on the phone was being tapped. Weird, because I got semi-involved in it, in that the guy who wound up ratting him out to the cops was one of Eddie's students. And Gerald and I are talking about, you know, his, possibility of him fighting in the UFC, who's he want to fight, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And Rafael Torre's name comes up. And I'm like, what's going on with that dude? And I was talking to the guy on the phone about it. I was like, what's going on with that guy? And then the cops called me afterwards and said, hey, we were tapping that guy's phone. We want to know what you know. And so Gerald was like being tapped. And he was like talking to all these different people about it. And then, you know, everybody that he talked to on the phone, they had to talk to the cops. And I was like, whoa, I'm on the fucking set of Fear Factor. I'm in my trailer.
Jesus.
Yeah, putting my microphone on. I'm like, huh?
And you were in a murder case all of a sudden.
But I didn't really know anything. I didn't know the guy. I just knew the guy through Eddie.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I don't want to fucking go to court about that. I'm like, hey, listen, I don't know that guy. I go, this is what I know. He's a fake black belt. I told him the whole deal. And I had heard that he killed somebody, but I wasn't sure if it was true because the guy's so full of shit.
Yeah.
Arrested in 2003, Bartel faced trial 2 years later. He admitted to the killing, but spun a new story. Self-defense, claiming Brian had confronted him over the affair with a gun. Obviously, he was the victim and was just trying to defend himself. The jury would be the final group of people to not buy into Rafael's story of his life, and they found him guilty. On August 18, 2005, Ralph Bartel was convicted of murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. The man who'd once styled himself as Rafael Torre, a fighter, a Navy SEAL, a journalist, and a legend, had finally evaporated, leaving only in his place a convicted murderer with no stories left to tell. Who are we kidding? Tales of Bartel talking about his old fighting days are still trickling out from his poor cellmates. Rafael Torre was the creation of a man who wanted to be more than his reality allowed him to be. He fooled a lot of people, and it really shows that even at the upper levels you will find people who are still taken in by some charisma and a good backstory. Even when he achieved a life he could be proud of, he still wanted more and more and more until finally he would take another life in that pursuit. He had spoke of appeals in 2005, but nothing came of it. In 2022, he would see a Change.org petition go up for him, citing a coerced jury and all kinds of other accusations as to why he was convicted, but it received less than 300 signatures and went forgotten. He was last noted in a substance abuse treatment program around 2018 or 2019. With all his wants to become something greater than he was, in the end, the superfighter is now locked away without anyone willing to let him be anything other than an inmate.